Lieutenant Raven Harrison stood at the viewport of the Terran Embassy station, watching the swirling nebula clouds paint the space beyond in shades of purple and blue. The diplomatic reception was in full swing behind her, a gathering of species from across known space celebrating the latest trade agreement between Earth and the Vortexian Alliance. "Lieutenant Harrison," a melodic voice called out. "Your presence is requested at the central chamber." Raven turned to face Ambassador Zyxtal, their crystalline form refracting the station's lights into rainbow patterns across the floor. "Another toast to successful negotiations," she asked, already knowing this wasn't the case from the ambassador's shifting colors. "Not exactly," Zyxtal chimed, their form flickering with concern. "The Nemesians are questioning our species' capabilities again." Raven suppressed a sigh. The Nemesians, a warrior race from the Outer Rim, had been testing humanity's limits since first contact. Their latest fixation was on recreational substances, claiming their fermented nectars could intoxicate any species in the galaxy. They'd been particularly vocal about humanity's weak constitution when it came to such matters. In the central chamber, a crowd had gathered around High Commander Thex of the Nemesian fleet. His scaled hide shifted between deep crimson and burnished gold as he held up a flask of something that seemed to move of its own accord. "Your species claims to be resilient," Thex announced, his double-lidded eyes fixing on Raven as she approached. "Yet none who have sampled our stellar venom have remained conscious beyond 3 drops." The assembled diplomats murmured. Raven recognized representatives from at least 20 different species, all watching with various forms of interest. The Arxians' tentacles were coiled tight with anticipation, while the Meridian delegates' bioluminescent patterns pulsed rapidly. "Perhaps," Raven said carefully, "we could arrange a proper comparative tasting. After all, Earth has quite a few contributions to offer in this area." Thex's throat sacs expanded in what passed for Nemesian laughter. "You would pit your primitive fermentations against our carefully engineered intoxicants. Very well, Lieutenant. Let us see what your species considers potent." Raven tapped her comm unit. "Bridge, this is Harrison. Please have Quartermaster Patel bring up the special reserves. All of them." Within minutes, Raj Patel arrived with a hover cart laden with bottles. He caught Raven's eye and gave an almost imperceptible nod. They discussed this possibility. The Nemesians' challenge had been inevitable. "Before we begin," Raven announced, "I should note that human tolerance for various substances can be quite remarkable. We've evolved alongside our fermentation processes for thousands of years." Thex waved a clawed hand dismissively. "Prepare your strongest brew, Lieutenant. Let us end this charade quickly." Raven smiled, reaching for an unmarked bottle at the back of the cart. The liquid inside was clear as starlight and just as dangerous. "As you wish, Commander. But perhaps we should start with something milder. This particular spirit has been known to." "Do you question my capacity?" Thex's scales flushed deep crimson. "Not at all," Raven replied smoothly. "I merely wish to ensure this cultural exchange is memorable." The assembled diplomats pressed closer as Raven poured a measure of Everclear into a crystal glass. The liquid caught the light like liquid diamond, innocent in appearance but carrying enough punch to knock out a small horse. Thex snatched the glass, his scales rippling with anticipation. "To your health, Lieutenant," he said mockingly, "and to the imminent demonstration of human inadequacy." As the Nemesian commander raised the glass to his lips, Raven noticed Raj quietly preparing the medical kit behind the bar. Something told her they were about to make galactic history, one way or another. The room held its breath as Thex took a deep swallow of humanity's most potent commercial spirit. For 3 heartbeats, nothing happened. Thex stood motionless, the empty glass held loosely in his clawed hand. The assembled diplomats leaned forward, their various sensory organs fixed on the Nemesian commander. Then it hit. Thex's scales shifted from crimson to a sickly green faster than an atmospheric re-entry. His throat sacs inflated and deflated rapidly, and his normally pristine posture wavered like a damaged gravity generator. "This," he gasped, his double-lidded eyes blinking asynchronously, "this is impossible." Raj stepped forward, medical scanner already humming. "Commander, perhaps you should." Silence. Thex roared, though the effect was somewhat diminished by the way his voice cracked. "What manner of chemical warfare is this?" Raven kept her voice steady, professional. "That, Commander, is a spirit called Everclear. Perfectly legal, commercially available on Earth. Though most humans prefer it mixed or diluted." The Arxian delegation's tentacles writhed with interest. "You dilute this substance?" their representative asked, their translator struggling to convey their mix of horror and fascination. "Usually," Raj explained, still hovering near Thex with his medical scanner. "It's approximately 95% pure ethanol. Most humans consider it more of an industrial product than a recreational drink." Thex swayed dangerously, his tail failing to provide its usual balance. "Industrial, you drink industrial solvents for pleasure?" A ripple of murmur spread through the gathered aliens. The Meridian delegate's bioluminescence had shifted to a frequency that indicated either deep respect or severe indigestion. Raven could never quite tell the difference. "Commander," Raven said gently, "perhaps you'd like to sit down. The first few minutes can be intense." "I do not require," Thex began, then promptly collapsed into a nearby chair, his scales now cycling through colors faster than a malfunctioning holodisplay. "Perhaps, a brief rest." Ambassador ZYX's crystalline form vibrated with what Raven recognized as barely contained amusement. "It seems, High Commander, that human resilience extends beyond their physical capabilities." The Nemesian's throat sacs pulsed weakly. How do your people withstand this?" "Practice," Raj said, finally getting a clear medical scan. "Millennia of cultural evolution alongside fermentation. Plus," he added with a slight smile, "most of us learn the hard way not to drink it straight." A young Vortexian diplomat floated forward, their gaseous form swirling with curiosity. "Does this mean humans are naturally resistant to all toxins?" "Not at all," Raven clarified. "We're just adaptable. And sometimes stubborn about our adaptations." Thex attempted to stand, managed to get halfway up, then thought better of it. "The stellar venom," he muttered, "our most potent brew. Would you like to compare them?" Raven asked innocently. The commander's scales blanched to an almost translucent white. "Perhaps, another time." The diplomatic chamber buzzed with excited discussions in dozens of languages. Raven could already see several species taking careful notes, while others were discreetly trying to scan the bottle of Everclear from a safe distance. Ambassador ZYXtal chimed softly. "Lieutenant Harrison, I believe you may have just revolutionized interstellar relations." "Not intentionally," Raven admitted. "Though I suppose it's fitting. Humans have been using alcohol to facilitate diplomatic relations since before we invented writing." "Fascinating," a Meridian delegate pulsed. "And this is not even your strongest substance?" Raj and Raven exchanged glances. "Let's save that discussion for another day," Raven suggested diplomatically. "I think we've had enough cultural exchange for one evening." Thex, still slumped in his chair, managed to focus his eyes long enough to glare at them. You planned this?" "Not exactly," Raven said. "But we did come prepared. Would you like some water, Commander? And perhaps we could discuss a joint research initiative into comparative xenobiochemistry." The commander's only response was a low groan, his scales settling into a queasy purple hue. As medical staff helped the Nemesian commander to the infirmary, Raven noticed something had changed in the way the other species were looking at her, at all the humans present. There was a new respect there, tinged with perhaps a hint of fear. "Lieutenant," Raj murmured, securing the bottle of Everclear, "I believe we may have just become the galaxy's designated drivers." Raven watched as species that had been skeptical of humanity's place in the galactic community now huddled together, discussing this new revelation about their Earth allies. Sometimes, she reflected, the most effective diplomacy came from the most unexpected sources. Even if those sources came with a proof of 190. Within 3 standard cycles, news of the Everclear incident had spread across the galactic diplomatic channels like a quantum wave collapse. Lieutenant Raven Harrison found herself suddenly in high demand at every interspecies gathering, though not for her usual security expertise. "Is it true?" asked diplomat Nix of the Centaurian Collective, their feathered crest rippling with excitement. "Your species intentionally created a substance that can incapacitate a Nemesian warrior." They were standing in the grand observation deck of the Terran Embassy Station, where an emergency summit had been called to address the growing interest in human beverages. The space was packed with representatives from dozens of species, all eager to learn more about humanity's apparent chemical resilience. "That's not exactly," Raven began, but was interrupted by a hovering quantum mind from the Silicon Concordat. "Our simulations suggest the molecular structure of this Everclear would be devastating to 73.2% of known sentient species," it hummed. "Yet humans consume it for pleasure." Raj Patel, who had been requisitioned from his quartermaster duties to serve as an impromptu xenobiochemistry expert, stepped in. "With respect, it's not that simple. Humans have a complex relationship with alcohol. It's cultural, social, and yes, sometimes recreational. But it's also something we approach with caution and respect." A Meridian diplomat pulsed skeptically. "Yet our records show your emergency medical facilities regularly treat humans for overconsumption of such substances." "Exactly," Raj nodded. "Which is why we have strict regulations, age restrictions, and safety protocols. Not to mention centuries of accumulated wisdom about responsible consumption." The assembled diplomats buzzed with discussion. In one corner, a group of Arxians were reviewing footage of Thexa's encounter with the spirit, their tentacles twitching in synchronized amazement. Near the viewport, several Vortexian philosophers debated the evolutionary implications of humanity's tolerance for ethanol. Ambassador Zyxtal crystallized beside Raven, their form refracting the starlight. "The Nemesian High Command has submitted a formal request for a detailed analysis of human metabolic processes." "Let me guess," Raven sighed. "They're trying to understand how we develop this capability." "Indeed. Though I believe their warrior pride has been, significantly adjusted." The room's attention shifted as a new figure entered. Dr. Lyra Blackwood, Earth's leading xenobiologist, finally arrived to address the growing concerns. Her dark skin contrasted sharply with her white laboratory outfit as she strode to the center of the gathering. "Distinguished representatives," she began, her voice carrying the weight of scientific authority, "I understand there are questions about humanity's relationship with ethanol and other fermented substances. Let me be clear, this is not a weapon, not a defense mechanism, and certainly not a sign of superiority." The quantum mind hummed skeptically. "Yet the evidence suggests." "The evidence suggests," Lyra continued firmly, "that humanity's tolerance for certain substances is the result of thousands of years of coevolution with our fermentation processes. It's a quirk of our biology, nothing more." "A quirk that rendered a Nemesian commander unconscious," someone muttered from the back. Raven stepped forward. "Which was never our intention. Commander Thex insisted on sampling our strongest spirit without proper preparation or dilution. We actually tried to warn him." "Speaking of the commander," Raj interjected, checking his datapad, "the medical bay reports he's finally regained his normal scale coloration. Though he's requesting all future diplomatic exchanges be conducted, alcohol-free." A ripple of amusement passed through the gathering, translated by various devices into species-appropriate expressions of mirth. Even the quantum mind flickered in what might have been appreciation of the irony. Dr. Blackwood raised her hands for attention. "What we're proposing is a comprehensive exchange of biochemical data. A chance to understand not just human tolerance, but the varied ways different species process and react to various compounds. This could revolutionize xenomedicine. And perhaps, Ambassador Zyxtal chimed in, prevent any future misunderstandings. The assembled diplomats began to show signs of agreement, their various appendages and sensory organs indicating growing enthusiasm for the proposal. What had started as a potentially disastrous diplomatic incident was transforming into an opportunity for unprecedented scientific cooperation. Raven watched as Lyra began organizing working groups, matching species with similar biochemistries to share research data. The Arxians were particularly interested in human liver function, while the Meridians wanted to study the neural pathways involved in processing ethanol. You know, Raj murmured to her, when I took this posting, I never thought I'd end up as an expert on interstellar bartending. Look at it this way, Raven replied with a slight smile, we've managed to turn a potential diplomatic crisis into a groundbreaking research initiative. All because some aliens underestimated humanity's relationship with grain alcohol. As if to emphasize her point, a small group of Vortexian scientists floated past, their gaseous forms swirling with excitement as they discussed the possibility of developing universal safety protocols for cross-species substance consumption. 1 month after the Everclear incident, the Terran Embassy station had transformed into an unprecedented hub of cultural and scientific exchange. The observation deck, once a formal diplomatic space, now hosted what Dr. Lyra Blackwood had dubbed the Intergalactic Symposium on Xenobiochemistry and Cultural Practices. Raven watched from her security post as Dr. Blackwood led a fascinating presentation on the history of human fermentation. The audience included everything from crystalline beings to gaseous entities, all riveted by holographic displays of ancient Earth brewing techniques. The process began over 10,000 years ago, Lyra explained, gesturing to a simulation of early human settlements. Our ancestors discovered that certain fruits and grains, when left to ferment naturally, produced substances that altered consciousness. Fascinating, hummed the quantum mind representative. Your species deliberately pursued this discovery. We did more than pursue it, Raj added, stepping up beside Lyra. We built entire civilizations around it. Some of humanity's earliest written records are actually recipes for beer. The assembled aliens processed this information with various signs of amazement. A young Arxian scholar's tentacles curled in what Raven had learned was their equivalent of raising an eyebrow. You developed writing, to document intoxicants? Among other things, Lyra smiled. But yes, the preservation and improvement of fermentation techniques was considered important enough to document for future generations. The discussion was interrupted by an unexpected arrival. Commander Thex entered the chamber, his scales now their normal burnished gold, though he kept a noticeable distance from the human beverage display. Commander, Raven greeted him professionally. We weren't expecting you back so soon. Thex's throat sacs pulsed with what might have been embarrassment. The High Command has revised our assessment of human capabilities. We wish to propose a joint research initiative. Ambassador Zyxtal crystallized nearby, their form shimmering with interest. A remarkable change in position, Commander. The Nemesian Empire acknowledges when it has underestimated an ally, Thex replied carefully. Though I maintain that our stellar venom is still more potent than most human beverages. Probably, Raj agreed cheerfully. That's why we're interested in studying its properties. The medical applications alone could be groundbreaking. The chamber's atmosphere shifted as more species began sharing their own cultural practices around consciousness-altering substances. A Meridian diplomat demonstrated their traditional light-weaving ceremony, while an Arxian elder described their species' ritualistic use of deep-sea minerals. Dr. Blackwood moved through the gathering, recording everything with barely contained excitement. Don't you see, she exclaimed to Raven. This isn't just about alcohol anymore. We're uncovering fundamental similarities in how different species approach altered states of consciousness. And more importantly, Ambassador Zyxtal chimed in, learning to respect our differences. Raven noticed a group of Vortexian scientists deep in discussion with Raj about the possibility of creating universal safety protocols for cross-species substance consumption. The quantum mind hovered nearby, running billions of calculations to assist with the complex biochemistry involved. "Your species," Thex said suddenly, addressing Raven, "we thought you primitive because you still used chemical substances for recreation. We failed to understand that this practice had shaped your very evolution." "We're full of surprises," Raven replied diplomatically. "Though I hope future discoveries can be made without anyone having to sample Everclear directly." The commander's scales flickered with what might have been amusement. "Indeed. Though I must ask, is it true what they say about something called moonshine?" Before Raven could respond, Dr. Blackwood's voice cut across the chamber. "Everyone, we've just received fascinating data from the Silicon Concordat's analysis of human liver function. It seems our ability to process ethanol might hold the key to developing universal antitoxins." The excitement in the room was palpable as species that had once viewed each other with suspicion or disdain now collaborated eagerly. Raven watched as Thex joined a group discussing the potential medical applications of both stellar venom and human spirits, his earlier embarrassment forgotten in the pursuit of knowledge. "You know," Raj said, joining her at her observation post, "when I first signed up for space duty, I never imagined I'd end up teaching alien species about happy hour." "Look at it this way," Raven replied, gesturing to the diverse gathering, "we've managed to turn one bottle of Everclear into the galaxy's biggest cultural exchange program." As if to emphasize her point, a holographic display lit up the center of the chamber, showing the complex molecular interactions between various species' biochemistries and different substances. It was beautiful in its own way, a testament to the unexpected paths that could lead to greater understanding between worlds. 6 months after the infamous Everclear incident, the Terran Embassy Station hosted what would become known as the First Galactic Conference on Xenobiochemical Safety and Cultural Understanding. Lieutenant Raven Harrison stood at the podium, surveying an audience that would have been unimaginable half a year ago. Nemesian warriors sat alongside Vortexian philosophers. Arxian scientists compared notes with quantum minds. Even the notoriously reclusive Meridians had sent a full delegation, their bioluminescence creating an aurora-like display across the chamber. "Distinguished representatives," Raven began, 6 months ago, a simple cultural misunderstanding led us to an unexpected discovery. Not just about our biological differences, but about our shared desire to understand each other. Dr. Lyra Blackwood took the stage next, bringing up a holographic display of the revolutionary, universal tolerance scale that had been developed through their collaborative research. "Thanks to data collected from over 50 species," Lyra explained, "we can now predict with 99.9% accuracy how any known compound will affect different biochemistries. The medical implications alone have already saved lives across 12 star systems." Commander Thex, now the head of the newly formed Interspecies Safety Coalition, stepped forward. His scales gleamed with pride rather than the embarrassment that had once plagued him. "The Nemesian Empire officially acknowledges that our previous approach to chemical tolerance was flawed," he announced. "We now understand that true strength lies not in resistance to substances, but in the wisdom to use them safely." Raj, recently promoted to Chief of Xenobiochemical Relations, couldn't help but smile as he recalled the chaos of that first night. "Who would have thought," he whispered to Raven, "that one bottle of grain alcohol would revolutionize galactic medicine?" Ambassador Zwextal's crystalline form sparkled as they presented the next breakthrough. "The Silicon Concordat has successfully developed the first universal detoxification protocol. A single treatment can now neutralize the effects of any known intoxicant across all documented species." The chamber erupted in appreciative gestures, everything from tentacle waves to quantum fluctuations. Even the Meridians pulsed in their unique way of showing approval. But perhaps most importantly, Raven continued, this collaboration has opened new channels of diplomatic understanding. Species that once viewed each other with suspicion now work together daily in our research laboratories. A young Vortexian scientist floated forward, their gaseous form swirling with excitement. We've even begun work on what we call universal beverages, drinks that can be safely enjoyed by multiple species at social gatherings. Though perhaps, Thex added, his throat sacs pulsing with what had become his version of humor, we'll keep the Everclear strictly for humans. The laughter that rippled through the chamber transcended species barriers. It was the kind of moment that the founders of the Terran Embassy Station had dreamed of, true interspecies harmony. Dr. Blackwood activated another holographic display, this one showing the complex web of relationships and research collaborations that had sprung up since the incident. In studying each other's tolerances and limitations, she explained, we've discovered something remarkable. Every species has its own unique strengths and vulnerabilities. By understanding these differences, we not only protect each other, we learn from each other. Raven watched as representatives from worlds that had once been on the brink of conflict now shared stories and compared notes. The Arxians had even developed a special tentacle gesture meaning, remember the Everclear incident, used whenever someone was about to make assumptions about another species' capabilities. Looking ahead, Raj announced, we're establishing permanent research facilities on 12 worlds. Each will focus on different aspects of xenobiochemistry and cultural exchange. And yes, he added with a grin, all will maintain strictly enforced safety protocols. As the conference drew to a close, Ambassador Zyxtal approached Raven. Lieutenant, they chimed softly, did you ever imagine that one diplomatic incident would lead to all this? Raven gazed out at the gathering, at the bonds formed and barriers broken. Sometimes, she replied, the best discoveries come from our most humbling moments. We just have to be willing to learn from them. The station's artificial day cycle began to dim, simulating a terrestrial sunset. But the discussions showed no signs of slowing. Across the chamber, species that had once been strangers now worked together, planned together, and yes, sometimes even drank together. Though these days, everyone knew their limits. To new boundaries, Thex raised a glass of the newly developed universal beverage, his scales shifting through proud colors. And to crossing them wisely, Raven responded, as beings from across the galaxy joined in the toast. In the end, it hadn't been advanced technology or military might that had brought these diverse species together. It had been a simple bottle of human spirits, and the willingness to turn a moment of chaos into an opportunity for understanding.